Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Veg Networking Canada. We're going to begin with a land acknowledgement because it's important that we honor, acknowledge, and respect that many of us are located on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territories of many Indigenous peoples of Canada. Veg Networking Canada is a group of plant-based vegan professionals and companies that get together and connect and collaborate. And today we have a special guest who is a social impact certificate holder for social finance and social enterprise models with Queen's University. She has a passion for supporting climate tech, plant-based alternatives, circular economy, healthcare, financial inclusion, and women founders. With a nonprofit background in building post-secondary entrepreneurs, she now works closely with angel investors across Canada to deploy capital into mission-driven founders. Veg Networking Canada is pleased to welcome Impact Investment Program Manager at Spring Canada. Welcome, Kristen Perry.
Thanks, Justin, for that great overview.
Well, we know a little bit about you now, but let's know a little bit more about your own personal vegan origin story, as that's what this group is sort of centered around, is vegan entrepreneurs.
Yeah, absolutely. Happy to share. So I grew up definitely not vegan. All of my family is not vegan still to date. And, dairy I eat pretty much every day. And for a while, I had started to hear kind of from the vegan community. For many years before I went vegan, I was already following some of the vegan influencers, Hot for Food with Lauren Toyota, Edgy Veg, all those sorts of things. And so I was subscribed and peeking in on some of those YouTube videos for a couple of years before I actually went vegan. And I think for me, it was in the pandemic. So I've been vegan for about 2.5 years now, and started just consuming a lot more content and educating myself on the world of animal agriculture and the environmental implications it has, how horrible animals are treated throughout that process, and really just the realities of what we're eating. And so started watching some of the standard documentaries that you see, like Cowspiracy, all those sorts of ones. And I think once I started to open my eyes up to that process, it kind of just clicked in my head of like, okay, this is what I need to do. And so I kind of just went vegan overnight. And I know for a lot of people, it's important to kind of transition or go vegetarian first. But for me, once I'd kind of made that decision, it needed to happen right away. And it only took a couple of weeks before I started to kind of look at other people around me eating meat or things like that and being kind of grossed out. And so it felt like that switch in my head kind of pretty immediately switched over. And yeah, so started off really motivated because of the environmental implications and also just the animals and the way that they were treated, and then learned a little bit more about the health and all of those aspects too. That kind of came a little bit later. And I think at that point I'd already convinced myself, but I also started watching some other documentaries like Dominion and others that are a little bit more intense in terms of their footage, but felt that it was important for me to fully kind of get the whole picture. So yeah, I've been vegan for 2.5 years. A friend of mine went vegan at the same time, which was great to have that support as well throughout that process. And now a couple of other people in my life are vegan as well, which is great to go through that process.
That's outstanding. And for anybody who doesn't know, we'll get a little bit more into sort of resources or things that have helped you along your journey. But you mentioned Lauren from Hot for Food and Candace at Edgy Veg. And so for anybody who doesn't know who or what those resources are, you can go there and drool away. But moving on from your own personal story in terms of vegan, plant-based and all of that into the conversation around entrepreneurship, intrapreneurship, and all of that, where did that start to begin for you and sort of what you do for your work?
Yeah, I got involved with entrepreneurship quite early on. I think my first kind of big taste of it was through high school. There's an organization called Junior Achievement, and they run what they call the company program. And essentially, you get together with a whole bunch of other high school students from other high schools. And I think it's around 6 months or so. But essentially, you get together, you decide to create a business, come up with some sort of idea, and you build this business. And sell products, and by the end of those 6 months you liquidate. And so I did that program for 3 years throughout high school. Each time was a different company, and found that I really liked building businesses, taking on leadership roles within teams, all those sorts of things. And I think what I discovered through that process too is that social impact side of it was always important to me from that stage. And so each of those businesses that we built had some sort of impact lens. One company was, and they're super simple companies too. They're not revolutionary ideas. So one was UV bead bracelets that we would like manufacture in our weekly meetings. We would be sitting there watching TV and making bracelets. But these bracelets essentially, they would light up colors under UV exposure. So you would know, okay, you need to protect yourself from the sun. And we donated proceeds to skin cancer research as well. And so that's similar to all of the other organizations that we built throughout that process. And so understood that social enterprise lens early on was always a part of my entrepreneurship journey. And then started studying business, had a particular lens within finance, venture capital, entrepreneurship, social enterprise models, all those sorts of things, and what I was studying. And discovered kind of the world of impact investing throughout school. And so at Queen's, there was the Queen's Social Investment Initiative, which was an on-campus club for impact investing, which was focused a little bit more on the investment side. And then at the same time, I started working on and building out a nonprofit focused on post-secondary student entrepreneurship. So we built that all throughout university, really being an intercollegiate network for student founders, mentors, investors, startup hackathon events, incubation, acceleration programs, all those sorts of things. And so really found that those were a couple of areas of passion for me. And then finishing school, was thinking, do I try to get in more with an impact fund? Where do I go from here? And there was always these ideas that we had for this nonprofit to potentially raise a fund to be able to invest into companies, build out more incubation programs. And so I ended up taking that nonprofit full time and trying to, build that into more of a sustainable organization, have that team supporting. And so we ran some incubation programs and really kind of scaled up that level of programming and started to raise a fund. At that point, I ended up, the pandemic basically hit at that point. And so that shifted around a lot of the work that we were doing, and really was a reflection period around where is our value in the ecosystem. And especially within the student startup and entrepreneurship ecosystem, it just became so saturated very quickly. A lot of resources for on-campus accelerators, incubators, all those sorts of things started getting funneled down. And so pivoted our focus into where we felt that our value really was with that organization. And I moved over to Creative Destruction Lab. And Creative Destruction Lab is essentially an accelerator that helps really massively scalable seed stage science and technology companies. So worked there as a venture manager, helping out a lot of these science and technology companies grow. And that was really great to see access to that network, but wanted to continue working more with investors and more specifically with impact companies. And so landed up at Spring Activator working within the impact investment work that we do. And so now I get to work with a lot of impact-driven companies, help them with investment readiness and raise their rounds. And then I also work with angel investors, help them figure out what their investment thesis is and teach them around things like their impact thesis, impact measurement models, really at the end of the day, trying to democratize access to angel investment and also deploy more capital into social enterprises and mission-driven entrepreneurs. And so, of course, some aspects is me kind of building out businesses and being the entrepreneur, and then some is more so me just working really closely directly with the entrepreneurs themselves.
That is very, very, very interesting work. I know that a lot of Veg Networking Canada members are women founders, and they are, in a position where being able to just have a conversation with you sounds like it will provide a lot of value. And those who have nothing to do with Veg Networking Canada who might be listening today might want to, send you an email or give you a phone call, because it sounds like really rewarding, meaningful work. And it also speaks to the power of our youth in your story when you do lean into when entrepreneurship is embedded inside of education and what that can actually do for young creative minds. So very, very, very fascinating. Now, in terms of impact investing as a whole, the industry that you're in, what are some trends or maybe like transformations for the better that you have witnessed along your journey?
Yeah, absolutely. And impact investing is still relatively niche industry, although it's been growing quite rapidly over the past 10 years or so, and it's becoming a little bit more of common terminology, or a term that people recognize and understand. And so I think with that more mass adoption of the term and understanding what it is, one of the trends is just a lot more interest from traditional investors. And with that, we do actually see a little bit of hesitancy around the word impact. And depending on what community you are around the world, to them, building a business is innately about impact. And so calling it impact is a little bit weird for them. Some communities, even domestically within Canada, I'll see some investors that are investing pretty much solely into clean tech or climate companies or healthcare companies, but they don't resonate with the word impact investor. And so I'm starting to definitely see a lot more traditional investors, whether it's funds or individual angel investors, paying more attention to impact and investing into impact businesses within the work that they do, even if they're not necessarily defining themselves as impact. And I think within the industry too, there's starting to be more niches or thematic focused funds or investment opportunities. And so as opposed to just being impact centric, now we're seeing things pop up that are specifically around alternative methods of financing, blended financing models. We're starting to see things specifically in clean tech, specifically in healthcare. And so all of these industries and these models of investment are becoming a lot more apparent, and there's a lot of resources coming around these specific areas. And I said briefly too, blended and alternative finance, such a huge topic within impact investing and social finance, of course, with social enterprise models. Not everybody is structured as this massively scalable for-profit business. There's a ton of different types of models to build out a business. And through the programs that we've run, we've seen co-ops come through that have, can't issue shares. And so we've tried to structure different alternative methods of investment. There's also a lot of grants out there where if you raise some equity financing, there's corporations that will do matching grants, those sorts of things. And so figuring out what types of investment models work for most people, and being willing and open to actually offer those is starting to become a little bit more standard in the industry.
So in summary, the trends or the transformations are models of investment, the adoption from the broader market, grant matching, and how that interplays with the way that the investments are structured and how things are built. Really interesting point too about language or etymology and how much because that's a broader scope trend for vegan plant-based. The whole industry as a whole is that language. Like, what do we call things? What's the unintended consequences perhaps of certain language? Very interesting, very interesting. So when it comes to Spring Canada, Spring Activator, can you tell us a little bit more about where you guys are going in the future?
Yeah, absolutely. So Spring itself, tagline is, we exist to change the world through innovation. And so a global accelerator, incubator, and advisory firm. And so a lot of the work that we do was started about 8 years ago. Co-CEO and founder Keith Thipple. And so Spring is mostly based out in Vancouver, but we do work in over 80 different communities around the world. And so we do work with a lot of entrepreneurs through acceleration incubation programs. We also run an impact startup visa program to help immigrant entrepreneurs come to Canada and build out their impact businesses here. And so that's a big portion of what we do, is capacity building and helping these entrepreneurs grow and develop their businesses. And then now that we've developed this pipeline of companies coming through, we have a lot of relationships with these companies, and we feel quite confident in them coming through those programs. Over the past 3 years or so, we focused a lot on the investor side of things. So that's part of the team that I'm involved in. And so a lot of that is angel investor training. We run our flagship Impact Investor Challenge model, which is an 11-week model that brings together a group of 30 or so angel investors that pre-commit capital, and 15 companies that are all mission-driven, raising capital. And they go through this 11-week process. At the end, they end up, one of the companies ends up getting an investment. And so really value add for both sides of the equation. We've run over 8 of those challenges now, trained over 160 angel investors, and helped to catalyze over $10 million in equity into these winning companies. So it's a little bit about kind of what we do. We also do some advising work and consulting work for impact funds, accelerators, things like that around the world too. When I think about Spring going forward, I think, we've built up these communities within a lot of these programs, and now it's just about connecting and really bringing more capital into these companies. And so So far, we inject, typically the investors pull around $100,000 for each of these impact investor challenges. But we're looking at finding ways to get even more capital into these companies that we're working with. And so we're launching a national impact focused angel network coming up next month, actually. And we're working towards raising a fund as well to be able to double down and really put more money into these companies. Besides that, I think Spring in general with our programming will definitely be working more in different communities. And so, like I said, we're BC based, but I myself am based in Toronto. And so really building out our programming in Ontario and further east, as well as internationally. And so bringing our programs to the US and to other parts of the world. We've started testing out running our impact investor challenges in a couple of other communities around the world. So I think building out to more communities, more of an international lens. And really, like I mentioned, some of the trends in the industries around really going into these thematic pieces, and so starting to have a lot more specialists within particular areas like circular economy, like clean tech, like healthcare, funds that are specializing in that. And so we're really pushing our programs to be a little bit more thematic in nature so that we can bring the best of those industries to those companies to help them grow. And Spring itself is really collaborative in nature. And so I do see us continuing to work with a lot of different organizations in the community and building out with a ton more partners as we grow.
So it sounds like where Spring is going in the future is in the best way possible, thematic world domination in the best way possible, giving back to impact-based companies. So that dovetails nicely into the next question. You can answer it from the lens of what Spring has done, is doing, plans to do, or even yourself personally. And that question is centered around charity and giving back.
Yeah, definitely. And I think for me, what's always been core to me is my career has to be aligned with my values. And so I find that I need to be doing giving back and doing, purpose-driven work day to day. And so because that kind of takes up so much of my time and consumes my time, outside of work, I do try to get involved with different boards or things like that and support entrepreneurs. At this moment, anytime, I'm supporting different charities or things like that, sometimes I like to support sanctuaries is a big one. I think if I'm donating, always, easy. And they have so many different needs, whether it's like winter proofing, every season, they need to do a ton of different things. And so donating to sanctuaries is an easy way to support. At the Spring level, Spring is a 1% for the Planet member and a B Corp. And so we do a lot of work through that. And we've started working with some different food banks and organizations, both in Vancouver and Toronto, that our team goes out to support with. And then, of course, at the end of the day, every company that we're supporting is doing incredible things and making the planet a better place. And so just really focusing in like my efforts to try to mentor those entrepreneurs and help to build out their companies more.
Absolutely amazing. Now, for you in your journey to where you're at right now, do any books, podcasts, or mobile apps on your phone stand out to help you do what you just said in terms of like being impact driven day to day, which really does count? Are there books, podcasts, or apps along your journey that have really helped you continue to do that?
Yeah. One book that was recommended to me maybe about 3 years ago when I was really thinking about taking that leap and going full time with the nonprofit, or what I kind of wanted to do at that stage, was called Designing Your Life by Bill Burnett and Dave Evans. And essentially it really just helps you to map out some of your skill sets, what you're interested in, and help you decide like what you want to do with your life and make it meaningful and purposeful. And so that was quite interesting to just go through that exercise at that time. A podcast, and Justin, you're probably familiar with this podcast, but David O'Leary's Impact Investing podcast, always a great one, really great guests and speakers on there. I know Keith from Spring did an episode there if anyone's curious about learning more about Spring and his journey. So that one's a fantastic one to dip your toes into impact investing specifically. We've been starting to do a lot more convening and bringing the community together, whether that's through the workshops that we run or just through social events. And so a book that I've just started reading as well is called The Art of Gathering by Priya Parker. And, you know, in this hopefully kind of post-pandemic phase, trying to get back together a little bit more in person, really just creating meaningful gathering experiences. If you're interested in that, that's a good book. Specifically around the vegan piece, someone that I go to for content, not necessarily a book or a podcast, but classic Earthling Ed. Tons of great videos out there on how to approach questions as a vegan. If people are asking you very direct things, how to give really just sound, logical, fact-based responses to a lot of those pieces. And if you're exploring veganism as well, it's a good way to get just informed about the topic.
Awesome. And as well, earlier on, you mentioned Hot for Food, Edgy Veg, and then the documentary Dominion as well, just to put that in there. So in terms of sources of inspiration for yourself, whether, I don't know, we don't know, it might be family, mega corporation, you know, a shop around the corner from you or what have you. But the question that we always ask our fine folks here is, where do you find sources of inspiration, and do you want to give any shout outs?
Yeah. I mean, I work with impact entrepreneurs every day. And so there are like hundreds I could name off. Sorry if I missed you guys. I'm not going to name off every company that I work with, but there's some fantastic ones that we work with. A couple of companies that I think are really cool that I haven't necessarily directly worked with, but I follow is SheerTex, which is building out this specific material that's really indestructible, and they make like pantyhose and tights out of that. And so for most women or people that wear those, you know, under skirts or whatever it is, they rip pretty much after every use. And so these are pretty much indestructible and good investment for lifetime. So definitely take a look at those, worth the purchase. Fable is really cool, sustainable. They mainly do dinnerware and servingware. It's gorgeous, you know, started getting interested in them because it looks nice, but also it's a very sustainable company, and they're doing incredible things. I'm also obviously a huge foodie, and so love supporting any of the local vegan restaurants and things like that. So one cafe that opened somewhat recently is Sushi Cafe, which is Japanese vegan place here in Toronto. There's of course like Odd Burger, Mavericks, Planta, all those kinds of things. A couple of smaller ones, there's Honey's, which is ice cream, vegan ice cream, which is great. And Bad Attitude Bread actually just did a crowdfunding campaign to be able to actually launch a bakery of his, which is really cool. So always love eating their vegan food and supporting them that way and following along with their journeys. And then of course, ones that you can buy in the store, Very Good Butchers actually came through a Spring program. So we're really, really excited to see how well that they've done through that lens. And then Justin, we were talking to about Nuts for Cheese. I mean, I could talk about vegan food companies all day, but yeah. And then of course I work with a lot of companies in clean tech, healthcare, circular economy, all those sorts of things. Those are all really early stage private companies, but they're doing fantastic things too.
So for anybody who's listening who has any interest in that mass range of different industries and topics, reach out to Kristen and have that conversation, and I'm sure you guys can have some great conversations. Inspiration is an interesting thing, and you listed off a plethora there for a lot of people, and as much as we can, we'll put these pieces of information in the show notes and stuff for people too. So go ahead.
I was gonna say I have just a list in my notes app of probably like 100 vegan restaurants and spots in Toronto. So well, I could go on forever.
Well, out east, it's sort of getting into dinner hour. For us out here west, it's, you know, lunch hour, and wherever people are going to be listening to this on YouTube or LinkedIn afterwards, wherever they are, I'm sure if they look up these places, they're gonna get hungry. Yeah. So last question for you, Kristen, is around wisdom, things you've learned, advice, however you want to frame that question. And whether, again, you're speaking to the youth who are in school or intrapreneurs or entrepreneurs or founders or angel investors, take that question and just run with it. And we'll end our amazing conversation with this.
Yeah. I think this kind of concept that I'll talk about is super useful for pretty much anybody, but it's specifically for that lens of if you're young looking to get into a career, or if you're an entrepreneur. And I think something that I've learned over even the past 5-6 years is just the value of building a values aligned community and basing it off of authentic relationships. And so building a community around you that cares about the same things as you, that is also motivated, to do that kind of work. And that's, how I've ended up getting in this field as well. Everybody that's on the Spring team and that we work really closely with is there because we're all super values aligned. And I think for entrepreneurs looking to build out businesses, it's super important when you're looking at bringing co-founders on, that you have that conversation about values alignment in your personal and your professional lives and what that means to you. When you're looking at working with different clients, or different team members and bringing people onto the team, that's so important. And just really building that community off the basis of relationships as opposed to just being transactional. And I think for me as well, as I've done a lot of work and built out different things, I end up being somebody that does a lot of everything. And so I find like the way that I kind of get into things is I end up just trying to do everything and kind of figure out everything. But what I've slowly started to learn too is just to be able to trust people that I work with and have a support system around to actually delegate and have other people do work. And I think especially for founders too, it's so important, even if you're kind of the brainchild or you have this passion project or you have something that you're working on, you can only get so far with it unless you bring other people on board to help you. And so identify what you're really good at and what you want to focus in on, and then find people that your values aligned with, that you can trust, and be willing to be a little bit vulnerable with them and give up some of that trust. And that's how you're going to be able to take that project from what you can do to what can really, really, take off and become a lot more scalable at that stage. And so, be willing to ask for help, be willing to trust others, and kind of grow from there and find out what you really want to be focused in on.
Totally. Founders, entrepreneurs, they wear 1,000 hats. So it sounds like you're saying give some hats away and be okay with that, because people might actually look better in that hat or wear that hat better than you, kind of thing. And I might get it wrong, but it also brings up, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. Bring up that quote as well. So we are, on that note of community, we are thrilled to have you here as part of Edge Networking Canada. It's great to hear about you, your story, to hear what's happening with Spring and across Canada, and also, globally, and the shift that's taking place with what people are calling different things and what they're comfortable with, and deep sense of values-based decision making that we're kind of all interested in. So thank you so much, Kristen. Is there, before we let people know the website for Spring and Instagram, is there any announcements or anything else you want to mention?
No, I think that's great. And thank you for, summarizing my rambles into really great quotes there at the end as well.
Summarizing rambles. I'm going to put that on the back of my business card. So, all right. So Veg Networking Canada is a place where vegan plant-based companies and professionals in Canada connect and collaborate. And we had another great conversation with us here today with Kristen Perry. Spring's website is www.spring.is. You're not going to see that very often, so it's very easy, spring.is. And on Instagram, it is @Spring Activator. Kristen, thank you so much for being a guest with us on Veg Networking Canada, and everybody else, take care, and we'll catch you next time.
Thank you.